learning how to make oatmeal peanut butter cookies is really easy. If you like peanut butter and you like oatmeal, you will love these cookies. This recipe is originally from allrecipes.com. I'll be sure to include a link below, but I'm doing half of a recipe because I didn't want a ton of cookies because I'm going to be making other things. So if you go to the website, the ingredients will not be the same as mine. Speaking of which, let's go through the ingredients. The original recipe calls for a mixture of shortening and margarine, but because I cut that in half, I'm just using one fat. And I'm using butter because I really like the taste of butter and I think it's more natural, and I just prefer not to use shortening and margarine for health reasons. I'll just discuss in another video. 1 egg. In terms of the sugar, I am using half of a cup of light brown sugar, which the way that I measure it is 120 grams. I'm using a little over a third of a cup of white sugar. Honestly, I think you'd be okay with a third of a cup, but I would go with a third plus a tablespoon of white sugar. Half of a cup of peanut butter, or as I measure it, 128 grams. As you can see, I just took it out of the container and I measured it in grams. So I'm going by the measurement for 2 tablespoons on the peanut butter jar, and then I just did the math and figured out what half of a cup would be. I'm using smooth. I'm pretty sure they use smooth peanut butter in the original recipe, but I don't see why you could not use chunky. This is actually no stir natural, so it's natural peanut butter that does not have the oil separation on the top. That's because some of the natural peanut oils have been replaced with palm oil. I'll maybe discuss that in another video, but I think the natural peanut butter that has the oil separation on the top, I'm not sure those would work out in this recipe, so you would probably want to stick with a no stir kind. For the flour, I'm using 3/4 of a cup, 115 grams, along with 1 teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt. If you want to use baking powder instead, you probably could, but that would change the end result. The cookies are going to be puffier. So if you have baking soda, I would go with that. And then half of a cup of quick cooking oats, or 80 grams. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by creaming the butter and sugar together. And this butter looks a bit odd because I was trying to soften it and I put it next to a boiling pot of water and it started to melt, but then it solidified again. So honestly, I think it'll be okay. I'm going to take my handheld mixer. I'm going to start creaming the butter and sugar. Because I'm going to break up the butter a little bit. Excuse me, break up the sugar a bit. And now I'm going to start creaming them together. I just finished creaming the butter and sugar together. I actually had to go through with my beater and break up the brown sugar a little bit more. My brown sugar is kind of old, and so it was really clumpy, and honestly I thought that it was going to incorporate a little bit more easily than it did. So if your brown sugar is really clumpy like that, I would, before you start beating it with the sugar, I would try to break it up a little bit more than I did originally. So now I'm going to add the other wet ingredients. I am going to add the egg, 1 egg. And I'm also going to add the half of a cup of creamy, natural, no stir peanut butter. And honestly, this is kind of sticky, so if you are using a food scale, I think the easiest thing might be to put this mixing bowl on a food scale and just measure from the peanut butter jar directly into the measuring bowl. That would be easier, and you wouldn't dirty a bowl or a measuring cup. And I always like to dirty as few things as possible. I'm going to cream this together. And now for the dry ingredients. The 3/4 of a cup or 115 grams of flour, along with 1 teaspoon of baking soda and half of a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to add these in stages. So I think if you added all the flour at once, you get covered in a cloud. And one thing that's making this harder than it should be is that this technically is not a bowl, it's a square, and it's kind of hard to get the beaters into the sides. And I think that if I had an actual bowl, it would combine more easily. But I didn't want to use a big bowl because it's big, and I figured this would be easier in terms of loading the dishwasher. But in a way, I guess I just made life harder for myself. Oh well. And now the half of a cup or 80 grams of quick cooking oats. I think I'm going to have to go through along the edges with a spoon, so I will bring you back when this is all incorporated. Now that I'm done making the dough, it's time to bake my oatmeal peanut butter cookies. I have my oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I sprayed my pizza pan, which I use as a cookie sheet, very lightly with canola oil. I know with the flourless peanut butter cookies I did tablespoonfuls, but this recipe calls for teaspoonfuls, so I am going to do heaping teaspoonfuls like this. And I'm going to drop them onto the cookie sheet like that. I'm almost done shaping the cookies. Like I said, I've been taking a heaping teaspoonful, it's a bit too much, something like that, turning it over, and then putting it onto the cookie sheet. And actually, maybe I took away too much. I'm leaving about an inch in between the cookies. I think that's enough space. The recipe from All Recipes says to bake them at 350 for 10 to 15 minutes. So I will tell you, actually I guess I do have room for another one. I will tell you how long it takes. My peanut butter and oatmeal cookies were in at 350 for 10 minutes. They're just starting to brown on the edges. They look a bit underdone in the middle there. There's a small bubble there. Some bubbles there. But they are brown around the edges. And that is what I want. I want them to be chewy. These oatmeal peanut butter cookies are now done. The recipe made 28 cookies in total. Some of them are a little smaller than others. The teaspoonfuls became more generous in the second and third batches. So if you make them, let's say this size, like ones on the bottom, you might get closer to 24. So just plan on 2 dozen cookies. Let's take a closer look. You can see nice texture. If I break them in 2, you can see that they're soft and chewy. These are delicious. They smell great. They are incredible. Please make sure that you try these. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.